When darkness falls and shadows twist across the walls, I take the chalk in trembling hands and write, over and over, I have never had children. The letters are jagged, uneven, almost bleeding across the plaster. But seeing the truth sprawled before me brings a fragile kind of safety, a sliver of hope that I might not completely unravel into the darkness within. In my village, the stories they tell paint me as someone who has lost their reason. Others whisper that I am a slave to demons. Let the fools assume they understand me. They never have or will, because they cannot see what I see. But those with eyes to see can feel the agony that never leaves me. If you follow me closely, if you dare to look, you might begin to understand. You might even ask, how do you defend yourself when the crime exists only in your mind, and you know, beyond doubt, that you are sane? Most nights, before all this began, my life moved in quiet, predictable rituals, small, ordinary actions meant to keep me tethered. I woke before dawn, boiled water in the same dented kettle I had owned for years, fed the stray cat that lingered on my back steps, though it never let me touch it. I used to read from the same battered book by lamplight, not because I loved the story, but because its words never changed. There was comfort in their sameness. Even then, subtle cracks appeared. Once, the kettle handle felt warm before I had lit the stove. Another time, the cat sat at my kitchen table, staring at me with a stillness almost too deliberate, too human. I told myself these were tricks of a tired mind, strange echoes of solitude. I repeated my truths until the odd feelings faded, leaving only the routines. But that was before the floor, before the girls, before Leila arrived, smiling like she knew how it all would end. It all started 3 weeks ago. I woke up on the floor of my own house. My cheek was stuck to something wet and sticky. It pulled at my skin when I tried to lift my head. Before my eyes could focus, my tongue knew what it was: copper. Sharp and metallic, the taste filled my mouth and made my stomach twist. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, loud and uneven, like someone was tapping from inside my head. When I tried to push myself up, my arms shook. My hands slid across the floorboards. They felt strange. Some spots were slick, others sticky. I moved very slowly, inch by inch, like someone trying to crawl through deep water. My eyes couldn't focus properly. Shapes around me blurred together, then separated again, as if the room itself was shifting. That's when I froze. 2 little girls lay just inches from me, their tiny bodies unnaturally still. Their skin was so pale it seemed to drink the light around them, with a faint bluish tint, as if they had risen from beneath frozen water. Their eyes were wide open, glassy, and fixed, not on me, but on something far away, something beyond the walls of the room, something I couldn't even imagine. In that empty, shining gaze, I felt a strange absence, a place where I did not exist, where my presence was meaningless, as though I had been erased from their world entirely. Their dresses were torn and twisted, clinging to their frail little frames in strange, unnatural shapes. Dark stains marred the fabric, smudged and streaked, some still catching the faint light with a wet, glistening sheen that made my stomach turn. Their hair was tangled, sticking to their cheeks and necks, smelling faintly of something sharp and coppery. I didn't know them. I didn't know how they had appeared in my home, or why they now lay motionless on my floor. But the first thought that struck me wasn't who are they. It was everyone will think I killed them. The fear hit me before anything else. A cold, sharp certainty that this nightmare would be pinned to me whether it was true or not. And then the smell reached me. It crept into my nose and slid down my throat, metallic and sour, final and unrelenting. It settled deep into my lungs, refusing to be expelled. No amount of shallow breathing, no amount of washing or scrubbing, could remove it. Even later, when I scrubbed my hands raw until they stung with fire, the smell clung to me, as if I had swallowed guilt whole and it had taken up residence inside my chest, a weight that would not lift. I lifted my head again, and froze for the second time. Something else had moved in the room, something that did not belong, and my heart slammed against my ribs as though warning me I was already too late. The creak of the front door pulled my gaze away from the girls. It was slow, deliberate, as though whoever was entering knew exactly what they would find. And there she was standing in the doorway, and at first glance, she was the Leila I remembered. My sister. Same olive skin, freckle high on her left cheek, and as I kept looking, my certainty slipped. Her eyes were too dark, the black seemed to swallow the color. When the light shifted, I thought I saw a glint of gold far inside them, like the reflection of a flame in the bottom of a well. Then it was gone. She stepped inside without a sound, her expression unchanged. Her eyes never widened. She approached me with a slow, deliberate patience, as though she had practiced this moment. Kneeling beside the smaller of the two girls, she gently brushed a strand of hair from the child's face with unexpected tenderness. "You shouldn't have done it, Adam," she said softly, almost sympathetically. "But maybe it's better this way." Her words didn't just land. They burrowed, sinking hooks into the soft parts of me where I was weakest. I wanted to speak, to tell her it wasn't me, that I didn't even know them. But my lips were dry, my tongue heavy and useless. I could only stare back at her, mute, while she looked at me with the steady certainty of someone who knew. Leila knelt beside the cold earth, her shadow stretching long and thin under the pale moonlight. The girls lay in a neat row, their faces pale as porcelain, eyes closed in eternal sleep. A shiver ran through the air, but Leila did not flinch. She lifted the first girl's hair in her trembling hands, fingers brushing through the tangled strands. "Sleep well," she whispered, the words cracking in the stillness. Her fingers traced the curve of the girl's cheek, smoothing stray strands across the cold skin, and for a moment the wind seemed to pause. The night itself held its breath. Then she moved to the next, brushing, straightening, almost tenderly, though the air smelled of earth and something darker, something permanent. Each girl's hair slid through her hands, stiff, cold, yet almost alive in the touch. When all were tended, Leila reached for the shovelful of dirt. Her hands did not tremble now. As the soil fell over them, soft at first, then heavier, she whispered one last thing into the moonlight. "I will keep you beautiful, even in the dark." The wind carried her words away, but the silence that followed felt alive, as if the girls were listening still. That night, I buried the girls in the garden. I told myself it was to avoid trouble, to keep the villagers from asking questions they would never hear answers to. But the way Leila stood over the shallow grave, hands folded in front of her like a mourner at a long-expected funeral, made the whole thing feel disturbingly like we were following a script she had read before. Leila did not leave. She stayed in my house as though she had never lived anywhere else. One night, Leila came into my room without knocking. She crossed the floor in silence and set a small, worn diary into my hands, its frayed ribbon trailing like a loose thread. I opened it to pages filled with childish drawings, stick figures with my face, crooked hearts, lopsided houses under heavy yellow sun. In shaky letters, the same message appeared again and again. How much they loved me. My chest tightened, each breath harder than the last, because I had never had daughters. In the mornings, she would bring me tea in the same chipped mug I had used since childhood, the steam curling between us in pale ribbons. The scent of cardamom drifted into the room, soft and deceptively warm. She would talk about the girls as though they had been mine, how the younger would cling to my leg at the market, how the elder would climb onto my lap for stories, her hair smelling faintly of rosemary from the garden. I had no memory of any of this, but the steadiness of her voice was dangerous. My mind began to create the memories she described. I could almost feel the ghost weight of a child's head against my chest. Other days were not so gentle. She moved through the kitchen like a storm, her steps sharp, her breath quick, and every movement carrying a restless fury. Plates slammed onto the counter so hard they jumped, rattling against each other until one cracked clean through. The air seemed to hum with her anger. Her eyes shone, not just with tears, but with something hotter, wilder. Once she stood in the doorway, her shoulders rigid, and her shadow stretching long across the floor toward me. "You destroyed our bloodline," she spat. Her voice trembled so violently that the words seemed to vibrate in the air, as if they might break apart before they reached me. They were all we had left. The silence after was worse than the shouting. I could still hear the faint ring of her words, hanging in the kitchen like the echo of a bell. After that, I stopped going outside. I told myself it was safer, but safety wasn't really the reason. The villagers avoided my windows anyway, crossing the road or turning their heads whenever they passed. Their eyes slid away from me as if even glancing in my direction might let something dangerous slip into their lives. At night, the house changed. Silence became crowded, thick with whispers that didn't belong to me. The walls seemed to lean closer, and the shadows pooled in corners until they weren't corners at all, just waiting dark. Every sound grew sharper, the creak of the floorboards, the soft sigh of the wind outside. But underneath it all, there was something else. Something small, moving just beyond the edge of my vision. I began to hear them, the girls, long after the earth had closed over them. At first, it was subtle. The faint patter of tiny feet across the floorboards, too light to be an adult's, but too deliberate to be the house settling. I would hold my breath, listening, certain I had imagined it, until the sound came again, closer this time. Sometimes it was a giggle, muffled, playful in a way no child could be if they were gone. Other times, it was the whisper of fabric brushing against a doorframe, a soft, dragging noise that made my skin crawl. Once in the hour before dawn, I heard a voice, soft, high, almost lost in the darkness, call out, "Baba," from just behind my head. My heart leapt into my throat, and my hands shook so badly I could hardly light a lamp. When the flame finally flickered to life, the room was empty. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. And yet, the air had changed. It carried a smell that hadn't been there before, warm milk, dust, and something faintly sweet, like dried dates. It wrapped around me, clinging to my skin, whispering of things I didn't understand. The shadows shifted in ways they shouldn't. The corners of the room stretched and compressed, and for a moment, I thought I saw the flicker of tiny, pale hands reaching out from them. I told myself it was just my eyes playing tricks. But then came the laughter, so soft I almost missed it, and I could swear it circled the room, circling me, following the curves of the walls as if it knew exactly where I would step next. Some nights, I would wake to find small, cold prints across the floor. Bare feet, too light to be mine, pressed into the wood, leading to walls I had never touched, ending at the corners where the darkness seemed thickest. Once, I saw a shadow linger near my bed, small and twisting, before it vanished when I blinked. The air turned colder, sharper, carrying that same faint sweetness under the smell of iron and dust, like a memory half remembered. I stopped trying to name them. I stopped trying to understand. The house was theirs now, and I was only allowed to watch. Every night, the shadows grew bolder. The whispers came closer. And sometimes, just before the first light of dawn, I could feel a small hand brush against mine. Not there, not real, and yet undeniable. The lamp flickered. My heart thudded. And I realized I was not alone. On the seventh night, the air grew heavier, almost suffocating, filled with the weight of secrets long buried. Every breath felt thick and slow, as if the room itself was pushing down on my chest. The shadows in the corners deepened, stretching and twisting until they were no longer just shadows. They moved, rippling like water, and then began to pull away from the walls. From the darkness, a figure emerged. At first, it looked like a man, but only at first. His body shifted and flowed like living smoke, impossible to hold in one shape. His eyes burned gold, molten and steady, unblinking. And his grin, it was too wide, teeth sharp and white, stretching across a face that should not have existed. "Magi," he said, his voice low and brittle, like wind scraping across broken glass. "Your hands are stained." My own voice trembled when I spoke. Who are you?" "A painter," he said, moving around me with the slow, careful grace of a predator. "And your mind, your thoughts, they are my canvas." He pointed toward the hallway. Leila stood there, half in shadow, her figure familiar yet wrong. "She tends the garden," he said. I couldn't move. My chest tightened with every shallow breath. "What makes you think she is my sister?" After that morning, I could not see her the same way again. I noticed strange things. How her skin seemed to ripple, as if something beneath it pressed to get out. Her voice sometimes dropped into strange pitches that did not belong to her, low and hollow, or high and almost screaming. Once, I walked past her reflection in the mirror. It smiled at me, wide and knowing, even though her real mouth had not moved. One night, she came to me quietly and said, her eyes cold and dark, "Your sister died years ago. I just wear her skin." The words settled in my chest like a stone. The air around us felt alive, moving, watching. I could no longer trust the warmth in her hands, the softness in her voice, or even the familiar shape of her face. She was not my sister, and I could not escape the feeling that whatever she truly was, it had been waiting for me all along. After that, the line between waking and dreaming dissolved. I'd step into the kitchen and catch sight of the girls at the table, bread in their hands, crumbs scattered across their dresses. Then, in an instant, the room would be empty. At times, the garden graves seemed newly disturbed. In sleep, I found myself digging there, only to unearth mirrors instead of bodies, each one casting back my own face, streaked with blood. The golden-eyed jinn traced my skin like a canvas. "Guilt looks best on you," he murmured. One evening, Leila sat across from me, steam rising from the tea between us. In it, I saw two small heads bowed together. "They're waiting," she said. "For what?" "For you to remember what you did." I told her I hadn't. She cut me off. "You did. And when you accept it, we can stop pretending. You've got to realize many storms you faced were your own fault. You brought them on yourself." The breaking point came on a moonlit night. I woke to find the soil disturbed again. Something pale poked through the dirt. I brushed it clean. It was a porcelain doll's cracked face, smiling. "They left those for you," Leila said from behind me. The golden-eyed jinn's hand rested on her shoulder. "There were never any daughters, Adam," his voice slid into my mind. "We made them for you. Every memory, every tear, paint on the canvas." I looked at my hands. The dirt, the memories, were nothing but lies and illusion. And yet the guilt sat heavy as stone. The jinn stepped closer, heat rolling off him like a furnace. This was only the start. Now the real suffering begins. Leila's form stretched into something impossibly tall, her eyes opening into black pits that led out of the world. And then I understood, with a chill running down my spine. All of this, the visions, the girls, Leila's strange skin, the golden-eyed one, it was punishment. I had tried to help a girl in the village who had been cursed by a jinn, thinking I could save her with prayers and herbs. I didn't know the curse belonged to a powerful jinn who would not forgive a human for meddling. By trying to interfere, I had crossed into their world, and they had decided I should pay. They filled my home with children who never existed, with shadows that whispered lies, with a sister who was not my sister, until I could no longer trust my own mind. Every night, the air pressed against me, thick and suffocating, reminding me that I was their canvas, their experiment, their warning. And now I was trapped, a witness to my own punishment, with no one to save me. Now, I walk the space between two worlds, neither fully mine nor fully theirs. By day, I move among the living, unseen, and ordinary. By night, I drift through shadows only I can feel, tracing secrets that cling to the edges of memory no one can understand.